The November rain hammered against the windshield of Caroline Sinclair's aging Honda Civic as she drove home through the empty streets of Millbrook Creek, a small town nestled in the rural heartland of Tennessee. At 42 years old, Caroline had learned to navigate life's storms with the same steady determination she applied to her work as a night shift nurse at Millbrook Regional Hospital. The clock on her dashboard read 11:47 p.m., and exhaustion weighed heavily on her shoulders after a 12-hour shift that had tested every ounce of her patience and skill. The town's main street was deserted, its handful of storefronts dark and shuttered against the cold autumn night. Millbrook Creek's population barely topped 3,000 souls, most of whom were tucked safely in their beds by this hour. Caroline turned onto Highway 47, a two-lane road that cut through dense forest for 6 miles before reaching the cluster of modest homes where she and her 14-year-old daughter Emma had lived for the past 3 years. The headlights of her car pierced the darkness, illuminating sheets of rain and the occasional deer that bounded across the asphalt. Caroline's thoughts drifted to Emma, who would be asleep by now, her algebra homework hopefully completed and her phone charging on the kitchen counter as per their nightly rule. Life as a single mother had been far from easy since Emma's father, Daniel, had walked out on them 5 years ago, leaving behind nothing but unpaid bills and broken promises. But Caroline had survived, and more importantly, she had given Emma stability, love, and a chance at a better future. As she rounded a sharp bend known locally as Devil's Curve, Caroline noticed something unusual ahead. Through the curtain of rain, she could make out several motorcycles parked haphazardly on the shoulder of the road, their chrome gleaming in the moonlight that occasionally broke through the clouds. A large cargo van sat with its rear doors open, and 4 or 5 figures moved around it with purposeful urgency. Caroline's nursing instincts kicked in immediately. Perhaps there had been an accident. Someone might need help. She slowed her vehicle, squinting to get a better look. That's when she saw it. 2 men were dragging what appeared to be large duffel bags from the van, while another man stood watch, gesturing angrily. Even from a distance, Caroline could see the patches on their leather jackets, the distinctive insignia of the Death Riders, a motorcycle club whose reputation for violence and drug trafficking had been the subject of countless warnings from local law enforcement. Caroline's heart began to race. She knew she should keep driving, mind her own business, disappear into the night before anyone noticed her. But as she pressed her foot gently on the accelerator, one of the men turned toward her headlights. For a brief, terrible moment, their eyes met. The man, tall, heavily tattooed, with a shaved head that glistened with rain, raised his hand and pointed directly at her car. Time seemed to slow. Caroline's hands gripped the steering wheel as she accelerated past the scene, her Honda's engine whining in protest. In her rearview mirror, she saw the men scrambling toward their motorcycles, their movements frantic and aggressive. She pressed the accelerator to the floor, her pulse thundering in her ears. The wet road made the car fishtail slightly, but Caroline maintained control. Years of driving these treacherous roads in all weather conditions serving her well now. The sound of motorcycle engines roared to life behind her, growing louder with terrifying speed. Caroline's mind raced through her options. She was still 4 miles from home, and these men on their powerful bikes would catch up to her within minutes on the straight stretches of highway. Her phone sat in her purse on the passenger seat, but taking her eyes off the road, even for a second, could be fatal at this speed in these conditions. 2 motorcycles pulled alongside her car, one on each side. The riders wore black helmets with dark visors, making them look like mechanical demons born from the storm itself. The rider on her left gestured violently for her to pull over, his hand movements threatening and unmistakable. Caroline shook her head, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. The rider on her right moved closer, dangerously close, forcing her toward the center line of the road. Then, as suddenly as they had appeared, the motorcycles fell back. Caroline didn't slow down to question this mercy. She kept her foot pressed hard on the accelerator until she reached the turnoff for Oakwood Lane, the quiet residential street where her small three-bedroom house sat among a handful of similar modest homes. She pulled into her driveway so fast that her tires screeched, not caring if she woke the neighbors. Her hands trembled as she fumbled with her keys, finally managing to unlock the front door and stumble inside. The house was dark except for the small lamp Emma always left on in the living room for her mother's return. Caroline locked the door behind her, engaged the deadbolt, and leaned against the wall, trying to catch her breath. Her nurse's training told her she was experiencing an adrenaline crash, elevated heart rate, trembling extremities, shortness of breath. She closed her eyes and forced herself to take slow, deep breaths. "Mom?" Emma's voice came from the top of the stairs, thick with sleep. "Are you okay? I heard you come in really fast." Caroline opened her eyes to see her daughter descending the stairs in her oversized pajamas, her long brown hair tousled from sleep. Emma had Caroline's green eyes and delicate features, but she'd inherited her father's height and athletic build. At 14, she was caught in that awkward transition between childhood and young adulthood, still clinging to her stuffed animals while simultaneously demanding more independence. "I'm fine, sweetheart," Caroline said, forcing a smile that she knew didn't reach her eyes. "Just a rough shift at the hospital. Go back to bed." Emma studied her mother with the perceptiveness that had always been her most striking quality. "You're lying. Something happened." Caroline considered maintaining the deception, but knew Emma would see through it. They had always been honest with each other, even when the truth was difficult. She walked to the couch and sat down heavily, patting the cushion beside her. Emma came and curled up next to her mother, just as she had when she was a little girl, frightened by thunderstorms. "I saw something I shouldn't have tonight," Caroline began carefully. "Some men on motorcycles, doing something illegal. They saw me and they followed me for a bit, but I got away. I'm sure it's nothing. They probably just wanted to scare me." Emma's face paled. "The Death Riders." "Mom, everyone at school talks about them. They're dangerous. You need to call the police." "And tell them what?" Caroline asked, running her hand through Emma's hair. "That I saw some men with duffel bags in the rain? I didn't actually see them do anything illegal. I could have been mistaken about what I saw. But what if they know where we live?" Emma's voice was small, frightened in a way that broke Caroline's heart. "They don't," Caroline said, with more confidence than she felt. "It was dark, raining hard. They probably didn't even get a good look at my license plate. By tomorrow, this will all be forgotten." But Caroline was wrong. Terribly, catastrophically wrong. The next morning dawned grey and cold, the storm having passed but leaving behind a raw dampness that seeped into bones and spirits alike. Caroline made breakfast for Emma, scrambled eggs and toast, and walked her to the bus stop at the end of Oakwood Lane, just as she did every school day. The normalcy of the routine helped calm her nerves. Perhaps she had overreacted last night. Perhaps those men had simply wanted to intimidate her into not reporting what she'd seen, and having accomplished that goal, they would move on to other concerns. Emma boarded the yellow school bus with her backpack slung over one shoulder, turning to wave at her mother before disappearing inside. Caroline waved back, watching until the bus turned the corner and vanished from sight. She walked back to her house, noting that her neighbors, the Hendersons on one side and old Mr. Patterson on the other, were already gone for the day, their driveways empty. Caroline had the day shift off, a rare luxury that she planned to use catching up on laundry, grocery shopping, and perhaps taking a nap before Emma returned home at 3:30. She poured herself a second cup of coffee and settled at the kitchen table with the local newspaper, trying to lose herself in the mundane details of small-town life. A proposed new stoplight at the intersection of Main and Church, the high school football team's chances at the regional championship, a debate over the town budget for snow removal. At 10:15 a.m., a knock on her front door made Caroline jump, coffee sloshing over the rim of her mug. She set the cup down carefully and walked to the door, peering through the peephole. Two men stood on her porch, neither of them wearing the leather and patches of motorcycle club members. One was middle-aged with graying hair and a weathered face, dressed in jeans and a flannel shirt. The other was younger, perhaps in his late 20s, with sandy blonde hair and an easy smile. They looked ordinary, unthreatening. Exactly the kind of men you might see at the hardware store or the local diner. "Can I help you?" Caroline called through the door without opening it. "Mrs. Sinclair," the older man said, his voice friendly and warm. "My name is Robert Mitchell. This is my associate, Travis Brennan. We're with the county assessor's office doing a survey of properties in this area. Could we have just a few minutes of your time?" Caroline hesitated. It sounded legitimate, and she vaguely remembered receiving a notice in the mail about property assessments being updated. Still, after last night, every instinct screamed at her to be cautious. "Do you have identification?" "Of course." The older man held up what appeared to be an official-looking badge and ID card to the peephole. From where Caroline stood, it looked genuine enough, complete with the county seal and his photograph. Feeling slightly foolish for her paranoia, Caroline unlocked the door and opened it, keeping the security chain engaged. "I'm sorry, I'm just being careful. What do you need to know?" Robert Mitchell's smile widened. "No need to apologize, Mrs. Sinclair. A woman living alone can't be too careful these days." The way he said "living alone" sent a chill down Caroline's spine. How did he know she lived alone? "We just need to verify some information about your property for our records. May we come in? This won't take more than 5 or 10 minutes. "Actually, now isn't a great time," Caroline said, her hand moving toward the door to close it. "Perhaps you could leave me some paperwork to fill out and I'll mail it back to your office." The friendly expressions on both men's faces evaporated instantly. Robert Mitchell's hand shot out and grabbed the edge of the door, preventing Caroline from closing it. "I think you'd better reconsider, Mrs. Sinclair. We really need to talk to you about what you saw last night." Terror flooded through Caroline's body. She tried to slam the door shut, but Mitchell's grip was too strong. Travis Brennan pulled a crowbar from behind his back and jammed it into the gap between the door and the frame, splintering wood as he pried against the security chain. The chain gave way with a metallic snap, and both men pushed their way inside, forcing Caroline backward into her own living room. "Please," Caroline gasped, her hands raised in a defensive gesture. "I didn't see anything. I don't know what you're talking about." "You saw plenty," Mitchell said, closing the door behind them. His voice had lost all pretense of friendliness. Now it was cold, businesslike. "You saw a transfer that was supposed to be invisible. You saw faces that weren't supposed to be seen. And now we have a problem." "I won't tell anyone," Caroline said, backing toward the kitchen. "If she could reach her phone, if she could call for help, I swear I'll forget everything. Just please leave." Travis Brennan laughed, a harsh sound devoid of humor. "It's not that simple, lady. Our boss doesn't take chances. He wants to make sure you understand the consequences of talking to the police or anyone else." What happened next would haunt Caroline's nightmares for months to come. Mitchell grabbed her by the arm, his grip bruising in its intensity, while Brennan systematically began destroying her home. He swept dishes from the kitchen counter, sending them crashing to the floor. He overturned the coffee table, scattering magazines and Emma's school books across the carpet. He ripped down the curtains from the living room windows, tearing the fabric with savage pleasure. "Stop!" Caroline screamed, trying to pull free from Mitchell's grip. "Please, you're destroying everything." Mitchell backhanded her across the face, The blow sending her crashing into the wall. Stars exploded across her vision, and she tasted blood where her lip had split against her teeth. "You need to understand something," Mitchell said, leaning close enough that she could smell coffee and cigarettes on his breath. "This is just a warning, a reminder to keep your mouth shut. If you go to the police, if you tell anyone what you saw, next time it won't be your furniture that gets broken, it'll be your daughter." The mention of Emma sent a fresh wave of terror through Caroline. "Don't you dare touch her," she sobbed, no longer caring about her own safety, only about Emma's. "That's entirely up to you," Brennan said, pausing in his destruction to look at her with cold, dead eyes. "You stay quiet, go about your business, and your daughter stays safe. You talk, and we'll make sure you regret it. We know where she goes to school. We know what time her bus arrives every morning. We know everything about you, Caroline." The use of her first name was somehow more terrifying than anything else. This intimate knowledge of her life, her routines, her vulnerabilities. Mitchell released her arm, and Caroline slid down the wall to sit on the floor, hugging her knees to her chest. The two men surveyed their handiwork, the destroyed living room, the sobbing woman, the clear message of dominance and threat delivered with brutal efficiency. "Remember what we said," Mitchell added as they moved toward the door. "Not a word to anyone. We'll be watching." Then they were gone, the front door standing open to the cold November air. Caroline sat amid the wreckage of her home, blood trickling from her split lip, her body trembling with shock and fear. She had no idea how long she remained there, minutes or hours, before she finally found the strength to stand close and lock the broken door and stumble to the bathroom to look at her injuries in the mirror. Her reflection showed a woman on the edge of breaking. Her lip was swollen and still bleeding slightly. A bruise was already forming on her cheek where Mitchell had struck her. But worse than the physical injuries was the look in her own eyes, the hollow, haunted expression of someone whose sense of safety had been violently shattered. Caroline cleaned her wounds with shaking hands, applied ice to her swollen cheek, and then stood in the bathroom trying to decide what to do. Call the police. But Mitchell and Brennan had made it clear what would happen if she did. They knew where Emma went to school. They could get to her daughter at any time. The thought of those men laying their hands on Emma, hurting her beautiful, innocent daughter, was more than Caroline could bear. So she made a choice. She would clean up the mess, say nothing to anyone, and pray that this nightmare would end. She spent the next 3 hours putting her home back together as best she could, sweeping up broken dishes, righting overturned furniture, disposing of torn curtains. By the time Emma's bus was due, the worst of the damage had been hidden or removed, though the splintered door frame and missing security chain were impossible to completely conceal. When Emma walked through the door at 3:35 p.m., Caroline was waiting with a forced smile and a story about how she'd tripped while carrying groceries and fallen against the door, breaking the chain. Emma, trusting and concerned, accepted the explanation and helped her mother cook dinner, chattering about her day at school, a quiz in English class, drama with her friend Madison over a boy they both liked, the upcoming school dance that Emma wasn't sure she wanted to attend. Caroline listened and responded appropriately, but inside, a part of her had gone numb. She had entered a world she didn't understand, a world of violence and threats where the rules she had always believed in, call the police, trust the system, do the right thing, no longer seemed to apply. She was trapped, and worse, she had no idea if her silence would actually be enough to keep Emma safe. That night, after Emma had gone to bed, Caroline sat in the darkness of her bedroom, staring out the window at the quiet street below. And there, parked 2 houses down under the dim glow of a streetlight, was a black motorcycle. Someone was watching. Someone was waiting. Someone was making sure she kept her promise of silence. The nightmare, Caroline realized, was only beginning. 3 days passed in a state of constant anxiety that turned Caroline's world into a waking nightmare. She continued her shifts at the hospital, treating patients with the same professional competence she had always maintained. But inside, she was falling apart. Every motorcycle engine she heard made her freeze. Every stranger's glance seemed laden with threat. And most importantly, every time Emma left her sight, Caroline's heart clenched with fear. The black motorcycle remained a constant presence on their street, though the watcher changed. Sometimes it was a tall man with a beard. Other times, a shorter figure with a shaved head. Once, Caroline was certain she saw a woman, long dark hair spilling from beneath a helmet, but the gender of her watchers didn't matter. What mattered was that they were always there, a silent reminder of the consequences of speaking out. Emma noticed her mother's changed behavior, of course. Caroline had become overprotective, calling the school twice a day to verify that Emma was in class. She drove Emma to and from school now rather than letting her take the bus, making excuses about schedule changes at the hospital. She insisted on knowing exactly where Emma was at all times, who she was with, what she was doing. The teenager's natural desire for independence clashed with Caroline's fear-driven restrictions, leading to increasingly tense conversations. "Mum, you're being weird," Emma said on Thursday evening as they prepared dinner together. "I know something's wrong. You can't keep lying to me." Caroline looked at her daughter, this beautiful, perceptive young woman who deserved so much better than a mother who couldn't protect her from invisible threats, and felt her resolve wavering. "I'm just stressed about work," she said, the lie tasting bitter on her tongue. "There have been some budget cuts at the hospital, talk of layoffs. I'm worried about our finances." Emma studied her mother's face, and Caroline knew the teenager didn't fully believe her. But Emma was kind enough not to push further. "We'll be okay," Emma said softly, putting her arm around Caroline's waist. "We always are. We're a team, remember?" That simple statement of faith broke something inside Caroline. Tears welled in her eyes, and she pulled Emma into a fierce embrace. "I love you so much," she whispered into her daughter's hair, "more than anything in this world." "I love you too, Mom," Emma replied, sounding puzzled but pleased by this unexpected display of emotion. "You're the strongest person I know." But Caroline didn't feel strong. She felt weak, trapped, helpless. And that feeling only intensified on Friday afternoon when she received a text message from an unknown number. The message contained no words, only a photograph. It showed Emma leaving Millbrook Creek High School, backpack over her shoulder, laughing with her friends Madison Walsh and Tyler Chen. The image had been taken that very day. Caroline recognized the blue sweater Emma had worn that morning. The message was clear. "We can get to her whenever we want." Caroline's hands shook so badly that she nearly dropped her phone. She was at the hospital, halfway through her shift, and she had to grip the nurse's station counter to steady herself. Her colleague, Janet Rodriguez, noticed immediately. "Caroline, are you all right?" Janet asked, concern evident in her warm brown eyes. Janet was 53, a veteran nurse with 2 grown children of her own, and she and Caroline had become friends over their shared night shifts. "I'm fine," Caroline managed to say. "Just feeling a bit dizzy. Maybe I'm coming down with something." Janet felt Caroline's forehead with the back of her hand, a gesture both professional and maternal. "You're clammy. Why don't you take a break? Go sit down, get some water." Caroline nodded gratefully and retreated to the staff break room, collapsing into one of the uncomfortable plastic chairs. She stared at the photograph on her phone, her mind racing through impossible scenarios. She could pull Emma out of school, claim they were moving, flee to another town or another state, but she had no money for such a move, no support system beyond Millbrook Creek. And would these men really let them simply leave? People who trafficked drugs, who employed violence so casually, would they accept losing a potential witness? The other option was to go to the police, despite the threats. Detective Sarah Reeves of the Millbrook Creek Police Department had visited the hospital several times in Caroline's presence, investigating cases that crossed the line between medical and criminal. She seemed competent, dedicated, someone who might actually help. But the risk. If Caroline went to the police and they couldn't offer adequate protection, if these men made good on their threats against Emma. Caroline buried her face in her hands, feeling the weight of an impossible choice pressing down on her. She remained in the break room for 15 minutes before forcing herself to return to work, pushing her personal crisis into a locked corner of her mind where it couldn't interfere with her professional responsibilities. A 78-year-old woman with pneumonia needed her expertise, not her tears. That evening, Caroline picked Emma up from school as usual, scanning the parking lot for any sign of the black motorcycles or their riders. She saw nothing obviously threatening, but that somehow made it worse, knowing they were watching but not being able to identify them among the ordinary cars and people that populated her daughter's school. The weekend passed in a blur of forced normalcy. Caroline and Emma went grocery shopping on Saturday, attended church on Sunday morning, something Caroline had rarely done but now felt desperate enough to try. She prayed in that small white church with its worn pews and faded hymnals, prayed to a God she had largely ignored for years, begging for protection for her daughter, for guidance, for some miracle that would extract them from this nightmare. No miracle came. Instead, on Sunday evening, the situation escalated dramatically. Caroline and Emma were finishing dinner, spaghetti with garlic bread, one of Emma's favorites, when they heard the unmistakable sound of multiple motorcycle engines roaring down their quiet street. Caroline's fork clattered onto her plate as she jumped up and ran to the window. What she saw turned her blood to ice. 5 motorcycles had pulled up directly in front of their house, engines rumbling like mechanical beasts. The riders didn't dismount. They simply sat there, faces hidden behind dark helmets, a wall of intimidation and barely restrained violence. Neighbors' curtains twitched as people peered out to see what was happening. Mr. Patterson from next door opened his front door and stood on his porch, arms crossed, watching with concern. "Mom!" Emma's voice was high with fear. "Who are they? What do they want?" Before Caroline could answer, one of the riders revved his engine aggressively, the sound ear-splittingly loud in the residential quiet. Then, in perfect synchronization, all 5 riders revved their engines, creating a cacophony of noise that set off car alarms up and down the street. It lasted for 30 seconds, an eternity of terrorizing sound, before they cut their engines and sat in silence, still as statues. Then the lead rider, distinguishable by the extra patches on his jacket, made a gesture with his hand. He pointed directly at Caroline's house, then drew his finger across his throat in an unmistakable threat. The message was clear and terrible. "We can end this any time we want." Caroline grabbed Emma and pulled her away from the window, her heart hammering. "Go upstairs," she told her daughter. "Lock yourself in your bedroom and don't come out until I tell you it's safe." "Mom, I'm not leaving you," Emma protested, tears streaming down her face. "We need to call the police. Just do what I say." Caroline's voice came out harsher than she intended, but she couldn't afford to argue. Not now, not with these monsters sitting outside her home. Emma, shocked by her mother's tone, ran upstairs, and Caroline heard the sound of her bedroom door slamming and locking. Caroline looked around her living room, searching for anything she could use as a weapon if these men decided to enter her home. A kitchen knife? A fireplace poker? How absurd that she was even thinking in these terms, like she was a character in some violent movie rather than a nurse and single mother who had only ever wanted a quiet life. But the riders didn't approach the house. They sat on their motorcycles for another 5 minutes, long enough for Mr. Patterson to disappear back inside his house. for the street to empty of curious onlookers, for the message to be delivered with perfect clarity. Then, as suddenly as they had arrived, they started their engines and roared away, leaving behind nothing but the acrid smell of exhaust and a neighborhood full of frightened, confused residents. Caroline sank onto the couch, her entire body trembling. She could hear Emma crying upstairs, and she knew she should go comfort her daughter, but she couldn't seem to make her legs work. She sat in the destroyed silence of her living room, staring at nothing, feeling utterly defeated. A knock on the door made her jump. For a terrible moment she thought the riders had returned. But when she looked through the peephole, she saw Mr. Patterson's weathered face, creased with worry. Caroline opened the door, and the elderly man immediately asked, "Are you all right, Caroline? Should I call the police?" "No!" Caroline said too quickly, too desperately. Then, moderating her tone, "No, thank you, Mr. Patterson. It's a misunderstanding. Someone I knew from before I moved here. It's complicated, but it's handled now." Mr. Patterson didn't look convinced, but he was from a generation that respected privacy and didn't push when told to back off. "If you're sure. But if you need anything, you just knock on my door, and I've got my shotgun if it comes to that." The idea of her 76-year-old neighbor trying to defend her with a shotgun against a motorcycle gang would have been comical if it weren't so tragic. "Thank you, Mr. Patterson. That's very kind. But we'll be fine." After he left, Caroline locked the door and went upstairs to Emma's room. She knocked softly. "Sweetheart, it's me. They're gone." The door unlocked, and Emma opened it, her face red and blotchy from crying. She threw her arms around her mother, and they held each other in the doorway, two women, one grown, one still growing, clinging to each other against a threat they couldn't fully understand or control. "You have to tell me what's going on," Emma said, her voice muffled against Caroline's shoulder. "Please, Mom. I'm not a little kid anymore. Whatever it is, we face it together." And so, for the first time, Caroline told her daughter the truth. They sat on Emma's bed, the same bed where Caroline had read bedtime stories and chased away nightmares when Emma was small, and Caroline explained everything. The night she had witnessed something on Highway 47, the men who had broken into their home, the threats against Emma, the constant surveillance, the photograph, and now this display of intimidation that had just occurred on their own street. Emma listened in silence, her green eyes growing wider and more frightened with each revelation. When Caroline finished, they sat together in the gathering darkness, neither of them bothering to turn on a lamp. Finally, Emma spoke, her voice small but determined. "We have to go to the police, Mom. This is crazy. These are criminals. The police can protect us." "Can they?" Caroline asked bitterly. "Can they really? We live in a small town, Emma. We have maybe 20 officers total. These men have an entire organization. They know where we live, where you go to school, probably where I work. How can the police possibly protect us 24 hours a day?" "So what do we do?" Emma asked, and in her voice, Caroline heard the terrible reality of their situation, a 14-year-old girl forced to contemplate violence and danger that no child should have to face. "We're careful," Caroline said, though even she knew how inadequate that answer was. "We stay together as much as possible. We don't take unnecessary risks, and we hope that if we stay quiet, they'll eventually lose interest and leave us alone." But both of them knew that hope was a fragile thing, likely to shatter at the first real test. That test came sooner than either of them expected. On Monday morning, as Caroline drove Emma to school, they noticed the same black motorcycle following them at a careful distance. Caroline's hands tightened on the steering wheel, but she said nothing, not wanting to alarm Emma further. She pulled up to the school's main entrance, and Emma gathered her backpack, preparing to exit the vehicle. "I love you," Caroline said, gripping her daughter's hand. Be careful, stay with your friends, don't go anywhere alone." "I love you too, Mom," Emma replied, and Caroline saw fear in her daughter's eyes, fear that broke her heart because she had put it there through her inability to protect them both. Emma got out of the car and walked toward the school's main doors, where groups of teenagers congregated before the first bell. Caroline watched, preparing to drive away, when something made her freeze. The black motorcycle had pulled into the school parking lot. The rider sat there, engine idling, facing the entrance, where Emma and her friends stood talking. Then, with deliberate slowness, the rider raised his hand and pointed at Emma. White-hot rage flooded through Caroline, momentarily overwhelming her fear. These men were threatening her daughter in broad daylight, in front of her school, surrounded by witnesses. They had moved beyond subtle intimidation into open harassment, confident that Caroline wouldn't dare fight back. But they were wrong. Caroline threw her car into park and jumped out, running toward the motorcycle rider. "Get away from her!" she screamed, not caring who heard, not caring about consequences. "Leave my daughter alone!" The rider seemed startled by her approach. Students turned to stare, and a teacher, Mr. Gerald Thompson, Emma's math instructor, came out of the school building to investigate the disturbance. The motorcycle rider, suddenly faced with multiple witnesses and an approaching authority figure, gunned his engine and sped out of the parking lot, leaving behind burned rubber and the metallic taste of fear. Mr. Thompson reached Caroline, who stood in the middle of the parking lot, chest heaving, tears streaming down her face. "Mrs. Sinclair, what's going on? Are you all right?" And in that moment, surrounded by confused teenagers and concerned teachers, with her daughter standing pale-faced among her friends, Caroline made a decision. She was tired of being afraid. She was tired of letting these men control her life through terror. Most importantly, she was tired of feeling helpless. "I need to speak with the police," she said, her voice steady despite her tears. "I need to speak with them right now." Mr. Thompson, to his credit, didn't ask questions. He simply said, "Come inside, we'll call from the office." As Caroline walked toward the school building, she looked back at Emma. Her daughter stood among her friends, and on her face was an expression of fierce pride mixed with fear. Emma nodded once, slowly, as if to say, "You're doing the right thing, Mom. We'll face this together." For the first time in days, Caroline felt something other than helpless terror. She felt the stirrings of hope, fragile, but real. The nightmare wasn't over. In fact, it was about to get much worse before it got better, but at least she was no longer facing it passively. She was fighting back. And sometimes, the decision to fight is the most important victory of all. Detective Sarah Reeves arrived at Millbrook Creek High School within 20 minutes of the call from the principal's office. At 38 years old, Sarah was one of only 3 detectives serving the small police department, and she had built her reputation on thoroughness, dedication, and an unwillingness to be intimidated, qualities that would be tested severely in the coming days. Sarah found Carolyn Sinclair sitting in Principal Catherine Morrison's office, a cup of untouched coffee growing cold in her hands. The woman looked exhausted, frightened, but also determined in a way that Sarah recognized from years of interviewing victims who had reached their breaking point. Sometimes, when people had nothing left to lose, they found courage they didn't know they possessed. "Mrs. Sinclair, I'm Detective Reeves," Sarah said, pulling up a chair to sit at Caroline's level, rather than standing over her. She had learned long ago that body language mattered, especially when dealing with traumatized witnesses. "I understand you have information about the Death Riders Motorcycle Club." Over the next hour, Caroline told her story from beginning to end. Sarah listened without interruption, taking careful notes in her leather-bound notebook. She noted the exact time and location of Caroline's initial witness of what appeared to be a drug transfer. She documented the home invasion by Robert Mitchell and Travis Brennan, the ongoing surveillance, the threatening photograph of Emma, and the escalating intimidation campaign that had culminated in the incident at the school this morning. When Caroline finished, Sarah set down her pen and looked directly into the other woman's eyes. "Mrs. Sinclair, I want to be completely honest with you about what you're facing. The Death Riders are not some local troublemakers. They're an organized criminal enterprise with connections to drug trafficking networks across 3 states. They've been on our radar for years, but they're careful, and witnesses tend to disappear or recant their statements before we can build a case." Caroline's face paled. "Are you saying I shouldn't have come forward?" "No," Sarah said firmly. "I'm saying you did exactly the right thing, and I'm going to do everything in my power to protect you and your daughter. But I need you to understand the reality of the situation so we can make informed decisions together." "What kind of decisions?" Caroline asked, her voice trembling slightly. Sarah pulled a folder from her briefcase and opened it to reveal photographs of several men, all wearing the distinctive leather jackets of the Death Riders. "First, I need you to identify anyone you recognize from that night or from the subsequent encounters." Caroline studied the photographs carefully, her hands shaking as she pointed out faces. "Him," she said, tapping a photo of a heavily tattooed man with a shaved head. "He was at the scene on Highway 47. He's the one who pointed at me." The photo was labeled Vincent Maddox, age 34, with a list of priors, including assault, drug possession, and weapons charges. She moved to another photo. "And this one. He was riding the black motorcycle that followed me to school this morning. Derek Cole, age 29, similarly extensive criminal record." But when Sarah showed her photos of Robert Mitchell and Travis Brennan, Caroline shook her head. "They're not here." "Describe them for me," Sarah said, flipping to a blank page in her notebook. Caroline did, providing detailed descriptions that Sarah sketched quickly. She had some artistic talent, a skill that had proven useful in her investigative work. When she finished, Sarah studied the sketches with a frown. "These men don't match any known Death Riders members. They might be hired muscle, brought in from outside, specifically because you wouldn't be able to identify them as part of the organization." "What does that mean?" Caroline asked. "It means they're taking you seriously as a threat," Sarah replied. "Serious enough to bring in outside contractors. That's actually encouraging from an investigative standpoint. It suggests you saw something important, something worth protecting." Caroline laughed, a bitter sound without humor. "That's supposed to make me feel better?" "No," Sarah admitted. "It's supposed to make you understand why we need to act quickly and decisively. Mrs. Sinclair, I'd like to place you and Emma in protective custody while we investigate this matter. We have a safe house we use for witness protection." "For how long?" Caroline interrupted. "How long would we have to hide? I have a job. Emma has school. We can't just disappear from our lives." Sarah closed her eyes briefly, searching for the right words. "I understand this is asking a lot, but the alternative is continuing to live under constant threat while these men escalate their intimidation tactics. Eventually, they'll move beyond intimidation." The unspoken threat hung in the air between them. Caroline thought of Emma, brilliant, kind Emma who loved biology and wanted to become a veterinarian, who was just beginning to discover who she was and who she might become. Could Caroline really ask her daughter to give up her life, her friends, her routine, to hide in some safe house for weeks or months? Before Caroline could respond, Principal Morrison's secretary knocked on the door. "Detective Reeves, there's a phone call for you. They say it's urgent." Sarah excused herself and took the call in the outer office. When she returned 2 minutes later, her expression was grim. "There's been an incident at Millbrook Regional Hospital. Someone vandalized the nurses' lockers. Your locker specifically, Mrs. Sinclair. They left a message." Caroline felt the blood drain from her face. "What kind of message?" "Written in red spray paint on your locker door. Snitches die." They also slashed your tires and poured sugar in your gas tank. Your car is inoperable. The room seemed to tilt around Caroline. They had been at her workplace. They knew where she kept her personal belongings. They could have attacked her colleagues, could have done anything. The invisible boundary between her professional life and this nightmare had just dissolved completely. "That's it," Sarah said, standing up and pulling out her cell phone. "I'm calling for protective custody right now. You and Emma are not going home tonight. You'll stay at a safe house until we can bring these people in." This time, Caroline didn't argue. She nodded mutely, feeling like she was watching herself from outside her own body. Sarah made several phone calls, speaking in the clipped, efficient language of law enforcement coordination. Within 30 minutes, 2 patrol officers, Marcus Webb and Jennifer Santos, arrived at the school to provide security while arrangements were made. Emma was called from her second period biology class, looking confused and frightened. Caroline pulled her daughter into an embrace. "We're leaving, honey. We're going somewhere safe." "What about our house, our stuff?" Emma asked, practical even in crisis. "Officers will escort you home to pack essentials," Sarah explained. "You'll have 15 minutes to gather clothes, medications, anything you absolutely need. Then you'll be taken to a secure location." The drive back to their house on Oakwood Lane was surreal. Caroline and Emma rode in the back of a police cruiser, with officers Webb and Santos in the front. A second patrol car followed behind. It was 11:30 a.m. on a Monday morning, and they were fleeing their own home under police protection. Their street looked deceptively normal in the late morning light. Mr. Patterson was working in his garden, and he looked up with concern as the police cars pulled into Caroline's driveway. No black motorcycles were in sight, but Caroline knew they were being watched. They were always being watched. 15 minutes, Officer Santos reminded them as they entered the house. "Pack light but smart. Think about medications, documents, anything you can't easily replace." Caroline and Emma moved through their home with mechanical efficiency, throwing clothes into suitcases, gathering toiletries, grabbing important papers from Caroline's file cabinet. Emma included her laptop and phone charger, a framed photo of herself and Caroline from a beach vacation years ago, and, Caroline noticed with a pang, her old stuffed rabbit from childhood, a toy she hadn't slept with in years, but apparently couldn't bear to leave behind now. Caroline took her important documents, birth certificates, medical records, bank statements. She grabbed her medication for anxiety, prescribed years ago, but rarely used. She took her mother's jewelry box, a family heirloom she couldn't replace, and she took one photo album, the one that chronicled Emma's childhood from infancy to age 10, before they'd started keeping everything digitally. They finished with 2 minutes to spare. As they loaded their suitcases into the trunk of the patrol car, Caroline looked back at her house, the modest 3-bedroom home where she and Emma had built a life together, where they'd celebrated birthdays and holidays, where Emma had done homework at the kitchen table while Caroline cooked dinner. Would they ever be able to come back? Would this place ever feel safe again? "Mrs. Sinclair, we need to go," Officer Webb said gently. Caroline nodded and got into the car. Emma slid in beside her, and they held hands as the patrol car pulled away from Oakwood Lane, leaving their life behind. The safe house was located in Riverside County, about 40 miles from Millbrook Creek. It was a nondescript ranch-style home on a quiet street that could have been anywhere in Middle America. Beige siding, small front lawn, attached garage. Nothing about it screamed witness protection, which was exactly the point. Detective Reeves was waiting for them when they arrived, along with another officer Caroline didn't recognize. Sarah gave them a tour of the house. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a modest kitchen, and a living room with a television, but no cable or internet connection. Security cameras monitored all entrances, and the windows had reinforced locks. "You'll be safe here," Sarah assured them. "We'll have an officer on site at all times, rotating shifts." You can't leave the property, and you can't contact anyone outside without clearance. That includes friends, family, co-workers, anyone. My job, Caroline said suddenly. I need to call the hospital, explain. We've already contacted your supervisor, Sarah interrupted. You've been placed on emergency family leave, and we've contacted Emma's school as well. Her teachers will send assignments remotely so she doesn't fall behind. Emma, who had been silent during most of this, finally spoke up. How long do we have to stay here? Sarah looked at the teenager with sympathy. I don't know, Emma. I wish I could give you a definite answer. It depends on how quickly we can build a case and make arrests. Days? Weeks? Emma pressed. Possibly weeks, Sarah admitted. But I promise you, we're working as fast as we can. After Sarah left, Caroline and Emma unpacked their suitcases in silence, each processing the upheaval of their lives in their own way. The officer on duty, a young man named Christopher Hayes, who looked barely old enough to be out of the police academy, stayed in the living room, giving them privacy but remaining alert to any threats. That first night in the safe house was one of the longest of Caroline's life. Emma couldn't sleep and came to Caroline's room at 2 a.m., crawling into bed beside her mother just as she had during thunderstorms when she was small. They lay together in the darkness, and Caroline stroked Emma's hair, humming a lullaby she hadn't sung in years. I'm scared, Mum, Emma whispered. I know, baby. Me too. But we did the right thing, didn't we? Going to the police. Caroline thought about that question. Had they done the right thing? They were hiding in a safe house, cut off from their lives, with no certainty about when or if they could return to normalcy. The Death Riders were still out there, still dangerous, still looking for them. But they were fighting back. They were refusing to be victims. Yes, Caroline said firmly, we did the right thing, and we're going to get through this, together. Over the next week, Detective Reeves visited them daily with updates. She brought news that was both encouraging and frightening. The investigation was progressing. Search warrants had been executed on several properties associated with the Death Riders, resulting in drug seizures and multiple arrests. But the key figures, including Vincent Maddox and the unknown leader of the organization, remained at large. We need you to testify before a grand jury, Sarah told Caroline on day 8 of their stay in the safe house. Your eyewitness account of the drug transfer, combined with the evidence we've gathered, could be enough to indict several members on trafficking charges. What about the men who broke into my house? Caroline asked. Robert Mitchell and Travis Brennan? We're working on identifying them, Sarah said. The descriptions you provided have been circulated to law enforcement agencies across the region. We've had a few potential matches, but nothing definite yet. Caroline agreed to testify, and preparations were made for her appearance before the grand jury, scheduled for the following Tuesday. Emma would remain at the safe house under protection while Caroline was transported to the courthouse. But on Monday evening, the night before Caroline was supposed to testify, everything changed. Officer Hayes was on duty, sitting in the living room while Caroline and Emma watched a movie they'd seen a dozen times before, escapism from their strange, confined existence. At 9:47 p.m., Hayes's radio crackled to life with an urgent message. All units, be advised. Vincent Maddox has been spotted in Riverside County. Consider him armed and extremely dangerous. Units are in pursuit. Hayes immediately stood up, his hand moving to his weapon. Mrs. Sinclair, Emma, I need you both to go to the back bedroom immediately. Lock the door and don't come out until I give the all clear. The fear in his voice told Caroline everything she needed to know. Vincent Maddox, the man who had first seen her that night on Highway 47, the man whose face haunted her nightmares, was nearby, and he was looking for them. Caroline grabbed Emma's hand, and they ran to the back bedroom, the one Caroline had been sleeping in. She locked the door and pushed a dresser in front of it for additional security. Emma's face was white with terror, and Caroline pulled her daughter behind the bed, putting herself between Emma and the door. They heard Hayes on his radio, calling for backup, reporting their situation. Then, for several minutes, nothing but terrible silence. Caroline's heart hammered so loudly she could hear it in her ears. Emma was shaking, and Caroline held her daughter close, whispering words of comfort that felt hollow even as she spoke them. Then came the sound of breaking glass from the front of the house. A crash. Hayes's voice, shouting. The unmistakable crack of gunshots, 2, 3, 4 shots in rapid succession. Emma screamed, and Caroline clamped her hand over her daughter's mouth, tears streaming down her own face. They heard heavy footsteps in the house, moving through rooms, searching. Hayes's radio crackled again, but this time there was no response from the officer. The footsteps moved closer, approaching their bedroom door. Caroline watched in frozen horror as the doorknob turned, testing the lock. Then a voice, deep and rough, spoke from the other side of the door. "I know you're in there, Caroline. Vincent Maddox. You remember me, don't you? You should have kept your mouth shut." Caroline couldn't breathe. This was it. This was how it ended. She looked at Emma, her beautiful, terrified daughter, and felt rage mixing with her fear. She would not let this monster hurt her child. "There's a window," Caroline whispered urgently to Emma. "Behind the dresser. When I move it, I want you to climb out and run. Don't stop, don't look back. Run to a neighbor's house and call for help." "I'm not leaving you," Emma whispered back fiercely. "You have to. For me, please, Emma." Outside the door, they heard Maddox laugh. "You think that door is going to stop me? That's cute." A tremendous crash as something heavy, probably Maddox's shoulder or foot, slammed into the door. The wood splintered but held. Another crash. The doorframe began to give way. Caroline shoved the dresser away from the window with strength born of desperation. She unlocked the window and pushed it open. "Go!" she commanded Emma. "Now!" Emma, tears streaming down her face, climbed through the window just as the bedroom door crashed open. Maddox stood in the doorway, a gun in his hand, his face twisted with rage and triumph. Caroline turned to face him, putting herself between this monster and the window through which Emma had just escaped. "You want me?" she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "Here I am. Let my daughter go." Maddox looked past Caroline to the open window, realizing what had just happened. His expression darkened further. "You stupid bitch! You think she's going to get away? We have people everywhere." But before Maddox could make another move, the night exploded with the sound of police sirens. Backup had arrived, multiple vehicles by the sound of it, surrounding the house. Voices over megaphones commanded Maddox to drop his weapon and come out with his hands up. Maddox's eyes darted between Caroline and the window, calculating his options. For a terrible moment, Caroline thought he would shoot her anyway, kill her simply out of spite. But then he turned and ran, fleeing back through the house toward whatever escape route he'd planned. Caroline collapsed to the floor, her legs unable to support her any longer. She heard more gunshots outside, shouts, the chaos of a confrontation. Then, finally, footsteps approaching her room. But these were accompanied by voices she recognized. "Mrs. Sinclair, are you injured?" Detective Reeves appeared in the doorway, weapon drawn, her eyes scanning the room for threats. When she saw Caroline sitting on the floor, alive and apparently unharmed, relief flooded her face. "Emma," Caroline gasped. "My daughter. She went out the window. She's outside somewhere. We have her," Sarah said quickly. "She's safe. She ran to the house next door and they called 911. She's with officers right now." Caroline dissolved into tears, all the terror and tension of the past weeks finally breaking through the wall she'd built to contain it. Sarah holstered her weapon and knelt beside Caroline, putting a steadying hand on her shoulder. "Officer Hayes?" Caroline managed to ask through her tears. Sarah's expression darkened. "He's alive. Shot twice, but he's stable." He saved your lives by calling in Maddox's presence before the shooting started. Backup was already en route when the confrontation occurred. And Maddox? In custody, Sarah said with grim satisfaction. You before you could testify. But they failed. Caroline looked up at the detective, this woman who had fought so hard to protect her and Emma. What happens now? Now, Sarah said, helping Caroline to her feet. Now, we finish what we started. You're still testifying tomorrow. And with Maddox in custody, along with the evidence we've gathered, we're going to dismantle the Death Riders piece by piece. Caroline was reunited with Emma outside the safe house, surrounded by police vehicles with flashing lights that painted the night in alternating shades of red and blue. Mother and daughter held each other for a long time, neither willing to let go, both grateful beyond words to be alive and together. Officer Hayes was transported to the hospital in critical but stable condition. The 2 bullets had missed vital organs, and doctors expressed cautious optimism about his recovery. Caroline made a mental note to visit him as soon as she was able, to thank the young man who had risked and nearly given his life to protect her and Emma. That night, they were moved to a new safe house, this one with enhanced security and multiple officers on duty. Caroline barely slept, her mind replaying the events of the evening over and over. But when she did sleep, for the first time in weeks, her dreams were not filled with nightmares. Instead, she dreamed of a future, uncertain perhaps, but possible. A future where she and Emma could return to their lives, scarred but surviving, forever changed but ultimately unbroken. Caroline Sinclair sat in the witness stand of the Robertson County Courthouse, her hands folded in her lap to keep them from shaking. The courtroom was packed. Journalists, law enforcement officers, curious citizens, and most significantly, 5 defendants seated at the defense table, their eyes boring into her with barely concealed hatred. Vincent Maddox sat among them, his face expressionless, but his body language radiating menace even in shackles. 3 weeks had passed since the attack on the safe house. 3 weeks of grand jury testimony, depositions, and endless preparation with prosecutors. 3 weeks during which the investigation into the Death Riders had expanded dramatically, revealing a criminal enterprise far more extensive than anyone had initially suspected. The drug trafficking Caroline had witnessed was just one small piece of a network that stretched across 3 states, involving millions of dollars in illegal narcotics, weapons trafficking, and money laundering. The lead prosecutor, Assistant District Attorney Margaret Thornton, was a formidable woman in her late 40s with silver-streaked hair and a reputation for tenacity that had earned her both respect and fear in legal circles. She approached Caroline now with a gentle smile, designed to put the witness at ease. "Mrs. Sinclair, thank you for your courage in testifying today," Margaret began. "Can you please tell the court, in your own words, what you witnessed on the night of November 3rd on Highway 47? Caroline took a deep breath and began her testimony. She described driving home from her shift at the hospital, the rain, the motorcycles, and van parked on the shoulder of the road. She described seeing the men, including Vincent Maddox, transferring what appeared to be duffel bags. She described the moment when Maddox turned and pointed at her car, and her desperate flight home. As she spoke, Caroline kept her voice steady, her eyes focused on the prosecutor rather than on the defendants. But she could feel their stares, their attempts to intimidate her even now, in this courtroom surrounded by law enforcement. "And after that night, Mrs. Sinclair, did you have any further contact with members of the Death Riders Motorcycle Club?" Margaret asked. This was the difficult part. Caroline described the home invasion by Mitchell and Brennan, the destruction of her home, the explicit threats against Emma. She described the constant surveillance, the escalating intimidation, the photograph of her daughter that had been texted to her phone. Several members of the jury, particularly a middle-aged woman in the front row and an older man who reminded Caroline of Mr. Patterson, looked visibly disturbed by her testimony. The defense attorneys took their turns during cross-examination, attempting to poke holes in Caroline's story. Had she been tired after her 12-hour shift? Could she have been mistaken about what she saw in the dark and rain? How could she be certain those duffel bags contained drugs rather than something innocent? Wasn't it possible she had simply encountered some motorcyclist dealing with a broken-down van? But Caroline had prepared for this. She answered each question calmly, clearly, refusing to be shaken. "I know what I saw," she stated firmly, "and I know what was done to me and my daughter as a result of seeing it." Detective Sarah Reeves testified next, providing a law enforcement perspective that corroborated Caroline's account. Sarah described the evidence gathered during the investigation, the drugs seized during raids on Death Riders' properties, the weapons recovered, the financial records that showed a sophisticated money laundering operation. She detailed the attack on the safe house, noting that Maddox and his accomplices had been armed with weapons that matched those used in previous unsolved violent crimes in the region. The prosecution also called forensic experts who testified about the drugs seized: methamphetamine, cocaine, and fentanyl, with a street value exceeding $2 million. They called financial analysts who traced money flows through a complex web of shell companies and cash businesses. They called victims of Death Riders' violence who had been too afraid to come forward until now, emboldened by Caroline's example. The trial lasted 8 days. Emma attended some sessions, sitting in the gallery with officers who had been assigned as their continued protection detail. Mother and daughter were still living in protective custody, though in better accommodations now, a small apartment rather than a safe house, with some freedom to move about under supervision. On the 7th day of the trial, something unexpected happened. One of the defendants, Derek Cole, the man who had followed Caroline to Emma's school that morning, accepted a plea deal in exchange for testimony against the others. During his testimony, Cole revealed details about the Death Riders' organizational structure that prosecutors had only suspected before. "There's a hierarchy," Cole explained, his voice flat and emotionless. "At the top is Marcus Reaper Donovan. He runs everything, the drug distribution, the protection rackets, all of it. Below him are the chapter presidents. Below them are full members, then prospects. I was a full member." "And what were you instructed to do regarding Caroline Sinclair?" Margaret Thornton asked. Cole didn't look at Caroline when he answered. "We were told she was a threat, that she'd seen too much and needed to be silenced. First, we tried intimidation, scare her enough that she wouldn't talk. When that didn't work, and she went to the police, orders came down from Reaper to eliminate the problem permanently." "By eliminate the problem, what do you mean?" Margaret pressed. "Kill her," Cole said simply. "Make it look like an accident if possible. If not, make it quick and make sure her daughter understood the consequences of talking to the police." The courtroom erupted in shocked murmurs. The judge, a stern woman named Judith Blackwell, banged her gavel for order. Caroline felt Emma's hand slip into hers. Her daughter had come to court that day and was sitting behind the prosecution table. They held hands tightly, drawing strength from each other. The defense attorneys attacked Cole's credibility viciously during cross-examination, pointing out that he was a convicted felon with everything to gain from cooperating with prosecutors. But the damage was done. The jury had heard from one of their own members that the Death Riders had ordered Caroline's murder. On the 9th day of trial, the case went to the jury. Caroline and Emma waited in a small room adjacent to the courthouse, accompanied by Sarah Reeves and Margaret Thornton. The waiting was agonizing. 3 hours, then 4, then 6. Emma tried to do homework on her laptop but couldn't concentrate. Caroline attempted to read a magazine, but found herself staring at the same page for 20 minutes without absorbing a word. Finally, after 7 hours of deliberation, word came that the jury had reached a verdict. Everyone filed back into the courtroom. Caroline noticed that several jury members wouldn't look at the defendants, a sign that experienced courtroom observers considered positive for the prosecution. Judge Blackwell asked the jury foreman, a middle-aged African-American man who worked as an accountant, if they had reached a verdict. He stood and confirmed that they had. On the charge of conspiracy to distribute controlled substances, how do you find the defendant Vincent Maddox? Guilty, Your Honor. On the charge of attempted murder, how do you find the defendant Vincent Maddox? Guilty, Your Honor. The verdicts continued, charge after charge, defendant after defendant. Guilty. 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 Of the 5 defendants on trial, 4 were convicted on all charges. The 5th was convicted on most charges, but acquitted on 1 count of weapons possession due to insufficient evidence. Caroline felt Emma lean against her, sobbing with relief. Caroline wrapped her arm around her daughter, her own tears flowing freely. They had done it. Against impossible odds, against threats and violence and intimidation, they had stood up and fought back, and they had won. After the verdicts were read and the defendants were led away, Maddox pausing to give Caroline one final hate-filled glare. Margaret Thornton approached Caroline and Emma with a weary smile. "You did an extraordinary thing," Margaret said, "both of you. Most people would have stayed silent out of fear, but you found the courage to fight for justice." "What happens now?" Caroline asked. "Are we safe? Can we go home?" Margaret exchanged a glance with Sarah Reeves before answering. "The immediate threat is significantly reduced. These men are going to prison for a very long time. We're talking 20 to 30 years for most of them. However, the Death Riders organization still exists. Marcus Donovan, the leader Cole testified about, is still at large. We have warrants out for his arrest, but he's proven elusive." "So we're still not safe," Emma said quietly. "You're safer," Sarah interjected. "Much safer than you were. But I'd recommend continuing to take precautions. We can arrange for you to relocate if you want. New city, new identities through the Witness Protection Program." Caroline looked at Emma, seeing her own conflict reflected in her daughter's eyes. The idea of starting over somewhere else, leaving behind everything they'd built in Millbrook Creek, their home, their friends, their life, was both tempting and terrifying. But so was the prospect of always looking over their shoulders, always wondering if today would be the day Marcus Donovan decided to finish what his subordinates had started. "Can we think about it?" Caroline asked. "Of course," Sarah said. "Take your time. Whatever you decide, we'll support you." That evening, Caroline and Emma had dinner at a small restaurant in Riverside County, still accompanied by their protection detail, but feeling lighter than they had in months. They talked about their options, weighing the pros and cons of staying versus leaving, of maintaining their identity versus disappearing into new lives. "What do you want to do, sweetie?" Caroline asked Emma over dessert. Chocolate cake they were sharing, a small celebration of their survival. Emma considered the question seriously. "I don't want to run away. I don't want to let them win by forcing us to give up everything, but I'm also scared, Mom. What if they come after us again?" "We'll be careful," Caroline said. "We'll take every precaution, and we'll be stronger now, knowing we can face terrible things and survive." "Together," Emma said, echoing the words that had become their mantra through this nightmare. "Together," Caroline confirmed. 3 days after the verdict, Caroline and Emma received news that changed everything. Marcus Reaper Donovan had been arrested in a dramatic early morning raid on a remote cabin in the Smoky Mountains. Acting on information provided by Derek Cole and other cooperating witnesses, federal agents had located the Death Riders' leader and taken him into custody without incident. The arrest had been coordinated between multiple law enforcement agencies, and it represented the culmination of years of investigation. With Donovan in custody, the Death Riders organization began to collapse. Without their leaders' organizational skills and intimidation tactics, the various chapters fell into disarray. More members accepted plea deals, leading to additional arrests. Within 6 weeks of the initial trial, the Death Riders had effectively ceased to exist as a functioning criminal enterprise. Caroline and Emma made their decision. They would return to Millbrook Creek, to their home on Oakwood Lane, to their life. But it would be a different life, lived by different women than they had been before. They had both been fundamentally changed by their ordeal, scarred certainly, but also stronger, more resilient, more aware of their own capacity for courage in the face of terror. Spring came to Millbrook Creek with an explosion of color that made the world seem new and full of possibility. The dogwoods bloomed in shades of white and pink, and the air carried the scent of fresh grass and honeysuckle. For Caroline and Emma Sinclair, it felt like emerging from a long, dark winter into sunlight they had feared they might never see again. They had been back in their house on Oakwood Lane for 2 months, and the adjustment had been both easier and harder than Caroline had anticipated. The physical repairs to their home had been completed. The splintered door frame replaced, new locks installed, security system upgraded significantly with cameras and motion sensors that fed directly to the police department. But the emotional repairs would take much longer. Emma still struggled with nightmares, waking sometimes in the middle of the night, convinced she heard motorcycle engines outside. Caroline had enrolled them both in therapy with Dr. Patricia Nguyen, a trauma specialist who worked with victims of violent crime. The sessions were difficult but necessary, providing them with tools to process what they had experienced and strategies for managing their ongoing anxiety. Caroline had returned to work at Millbrook Regional Hospital, though on a reduced schedule at first. Her colleagues had welcomed her back with warmth and support that had moved her to tears. Janet Rodriguez had organized a meal train, with different co-workers bringing dinner to Caroline and Emma every evening for the first 2 weeks after their return. The gesture of community and care had meant more than Caroline could adequately express. Emma had returned to Millbrook Creek High School, where she had been surprised to find herself something of a local hero among her classmates. Her friends, Madison Walsh and Tyler Chen, had been supportive and protective, running interference when other students asked intrusive questions about the trial or her family's ordeal. Emma's grades, which had understandably suffered during the months of protective custody, were slowly improving as she re-established her routine and found her footing again. But the most significant changes were internal, invisible to outsiders, but profoundly felt by mother and daughter. They had discovered reserves of strength they hadn't known they possessed. They had learned that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it. And they had learned that they could survive things that had once seemed unsurvivable. On a warm Saturday in April, 6 months after that terrible night on Highway 47, Caroline and Emma decided to take a drive. Not because they needed to go anywhere particular, but because Caroline wanted to confront the place where it had all begun. She wanted to reclaim her right to drive these roads without fear, to prove to herself that the Death Riders no longer held power over her movements or her life. They drove down Highway 47, past the gentle curve where Caroline had witnessed the drug transfer. The spot looked ordinary in the spring sunshine, just a shoulder of the road like any other, with new grass growing and wildflowers beginning to bloom. There was nothing to mark it as the place where their nightmare had begun. "Are you okay, Mom?" Emma asked, watching her mother's face carefully. Caroline surprised herself by smiling. "Yeah, I actually am. It's just a road, you know? It doesn't have any power over me anymore." They continued driving, eventually ending up at Harper Lake, a scenic spot about 15 miles from Millbrook Creek that Caroline and Emma used to visit frequently before the events of the previous autumn. They parked and walked down to the shore where families were picnicking and children were feeding ducks at the water's edge. They found a bench overlooking the lake and sat together in comfortable silence, watching the sunlight dance on the water. Finally, Emma spoke. "Madison asked if I wanted to go to the spring dance next month with her and Tyler and some other friends." Caroline looked at her daughter, noting the cautious hope in her expression. "What did you tell her?" "I said I'd think about it. I wasn't sure if... with everything that's happened, I didn't know if it would be safe, or if you'd be okay with it." Caroline took Emma's hand. "Emma, I don't want what those men did to us to take away more than they already have. If you want to go to the dance, you should go. We'll take reasonable precautions. I'll drop you off and pick you up. You'll stay with your friends, you'll check in periodically, but you deserve to have normal teenage experiences. You deserve to have fun." Emma's face lit up with a smile that reminded Caroline of her daughter at age 5, opening presents on Christmas morning. "Really? You mean it?" "I mean it. You've been so strong through all of this, sweetheart. You've had to grow up too fast, deal with things no 14-year-old should have to face, but you're still a kid. You should get to be a kid." They hugged there on the bench, and Caroline felt something loosen in her chest, a knot of fear and protectiveness that she'd been carrying for months. She couldn't keep Emma in a bubble forever. Life meant risk, but it also meant joy, friendship, growth, experience. She had to let her daughter live, even knowing that the world contained dangers. The following week brought more positive news. Officer Christopher Hayes, who had been shot protecting Caroline and Emma during the attack on the safe house, was discharged from the hospital after months of recovery. Caroline and Emma attended a ceremony at the Millbrook Creek Police Department, where Hayes received a commendation for valor. They watched as Chief David Holbrook presented the young officer with a medal, praising his courage and dedication. After the ceremony, Caroline approached Hayes, who was still moving somewhat stiffly but was otherwise recovered. "Officer Hayes, I never got a chance to properly thank you. You saved our lives." Hayes, who had struck Caroline as barely more than a boy when she'd first met him, seemed to have aged years in the months since the shooting. His eyes held a depth they hadn't possessed before, the look of someone who had faced mortality and survived. "You don't need to thank me, Mrs. Sinclair. I was just doing my job." "You did more than your job," Emma interjected, her voice thick with emotion. "You're a hero, our hero." Hayes ducked his head, embarrassed but clearly moved. "You and your mom are the real heroes. What you did, standing up to those men, testifying, that took more courage than anything I did." They talked for a few more minutes, and Carolyn invited Hayes to dinner sometime if he was interested. He accepted gratefully, and Carolyn realized that this young man, who had risked so much for them, had become part of their extended family. One of the unexpected connections forged in the fire of shared trauma. Detective Sarah Reeves remained a regular presence in their lives as well. She stopped by every couple of weeks to check on them, always professional but also genuinely caring. Sarah had become a friend, someone Caroline trusted implicitly. During one visit in early May, Sarah brought news that put to rest the last lingering source of anxiety. "We found them," Sarah said, sitting at Caroline's kitchen table with a cup of coffee. "Robert Mitchell and Travis Brennan, the men who broke into your house." Caroline felt her pulse quicken. "Where were they?" "Atlanta. Turns out they were hired muscle, brought in from Georgia specifically for jobs like intimidating you. They worked for a larger criminal network that contracted with organizations like the Death Riders. With Donovan's cooperation, yes, he's cooperating now, trying to reduce his sentence, we were able to identify and locate them. They're both in custody now, facing charges in multiple states." Caroline felt a wave of relief, so intense it left her lightheaded. "So it's really over." All of them are in prison. All of them, Sarah confirmed. The organization is dismantled, the leadership is incarcerated, and the few remaining members have scattered. You're safe, Caroline. You and Emma are truly safe now. After Sarah left, Caroline went to Emma's room, where her daughter was doing homework. Emma looked up from her biology textbook, and Caroline must have had something in her expression because Emma immediately asked, "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong," Caroline said, sitting on the edge of Emma's bed. "Everything's right. They caught the last of them, Mitchell and Brennan. They're all in prison now. It's over, Emma. It's really, finally over." Emma stared at her mother for a moment, processing this information. Then she closed her textbook, set it aside, and burst into tears. Not tears of sadness or fear, but of release, of relief so profound it could only be expressed through crying. Caroline held her daughter, and they cried together, washing away months of accumulated fear and tension. That evening, they celebrated by ordering pizza and watching one of Emma's favorite movies, a romantic comedy they'd seen a dozen times before. It was beautifully, perfectly ordinary. Just a mother and daughter spending a quiet evening at home, something they had done hundreds of times before the nightmare began, and would do hundreds of times again. The spring dance arrived, and Caroline watched Emma get ready with her friends. Madison and Tyler came to the house, and the three teenagers took pictures in the living room, while Caroline snapped photos on her phone, just like any normal parent on any normal dance night. Emma wore a teal dress that brought out her green eyes, and she looked so grown up, so beautiful, that Caroline had to blink back tears. "Have fun, sweetheart," Caroline said, hugging Emma before she left. "Be safe." "I will, Mom. I love you. I love you too, more than anything." Caroline watched the car pull away. Madison's mother was driving the teenagers to the dance and felt the now familiar pang of fear mixed with determination to not let that fear control her. Emma deserved normal experiences. They both did. While Emma was at the dance, Caroline accepted an invitation she'd been putting off for weeks. Mr. Patterson from next door had asked her to join him and several other neighbors for a community potluck dinner. Caroline had been avoiding social situations, uncomfortable with the notoriety her ordeal had brought. But tonight, with Emma safely at a school dance and the Death Riders definitively in the past, Caroline decided it was time to reintegrate into her community. The potluck was held at the community center, a modest building at the end of Oakwood Lane. When Caroline arrived with her contribution, a pasta salad she'd spent the afternoon preparing, she was greeted warmly by neighbors she'd known for years. Mr. Patterson introduced her to some people she hadn't met before, and to her surprise, no one asked intrusive questions about the trial or her testimony. They talked about ordinary things: the upcoming town festival, the need for new playground equipment at the local park, predictions about the high school football team's prospects for next season. It felt wonderfully, blessedly normal. Halfway through dinner, the community center's president, a woman named Linda Stewart, stood up to make an announcement. "I know we don't usually do formal speeches at these gatherings, but I wanted to take a moment to recognize someone special. Caroline Sinclair, could you stand up, please?" Caroline rose reluctantly, feeling her face flush with embarrassment as all eyes turned toward her. "Caroline," Linda continued, "what you did took extraordinary courage. You faced down dangerous criminals to protect not just yourself and your daughter, but our entire community. Because of your bravery and willingness to testify, those men can't hurt anyone else. You made our town safer, and we want you to know how grateful we are. You're a hero, whether you feel like one or not." The room erupted in applause. Caroline saw Mr. Patterson wiping his eyes. Several people she barely knew were smiling at her with genuine admiration and respect. She managed to stammer out a thank you, though later she wouldn't remember exactly what she said. What she would remember was the feeling of being embraced by her community, of being valued and supported rather than pitied or treated like a victim. When Caroline picked Emma up from the dance at 11 o'clock, her daughter was glowing with happiness. She chatted all the way home about the music, the decorations, which couples had danced together, and a boy named Lucas Martin, who had asked her to dance 3 times. 3 times? Caroline teased. That sounds significant. Emma blushed. He's just a friend, Mom, don't make it weird. But she was smiling, and Caroline knew that this was what healing looked like. A 14-year-old girl blushing about a boy, concerned about typical teenage drama, thinking about the future rather than being trapped in the trauma of the past. Over the following weeks and months, life continued to normalize. Caroline returned to full-time work at the hospital. Emma's grades improved to their previous levels, and she joined the school's science club, reigniting her passion for biology. They still had therapy sessions with Dr. Nguyen, but less frequently now. The nightmares came less often. The hypervigilance gradually eased, though neither of them would ever be quite as trusting or unaware as they had been before. In June, on the 1-year anniversary of the night Caroline had witnessed the drug transfer on Highway 47, she and Emma decided to do something symbolic. They drove to Harper Lake and wrote messages on biodegradable paper, words they wanted to release, things they were letting go of: fear, anger, victimhood, helplessness. They folded the papers into small boats and set them afloat on the lake, watching as they drifted away and slowly dissolved, carrying those burdens into the water and out of their lives. "We did it," Emma said, watching the paper boats disappear. "We actually did it. We survived." "More than survived," Caroline corrected, putting her arm around her daughter's shoulders. "We fought back, we won, and we're going to be okay." Emma leaned her head against her mother's shoulder. "Better than okay. We're going to be great." And standing there by the lake on a beautiful summer day, Caroline believed it. They had been tested in ways she would never have imagined, had faced horrors that would haunt them in subtle ways for the rest of their lives. But they had also discovered their own strength, their capacity for courage, their ability to support each other through the darkest of times. The Death Riders were gone, their members scattered or imprisoned, their organization dismantled. Marcus Reaper Donovan would spend the rest of his life behind bars. Vincent Maddox, Robert Mitchell, Travis Brennan, all of them would face decades in prison for their crimes. Justice had been served, not perfectly perhaps, but substantially. And Caroline and Emma Sinclair had their lives back. Not the same lives they'd had before. Those were gone, innocence lost, peace shattered. But new lives built on the foundation of survival and resilience. Lives that included trauma, yes, but also joy, pain, but also healing, fear, but also courage. That evening, as the sun set over Millbrook Creek, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Caroline and Emma sat on their front porch. Mr. Patterson was working in his garden next door, occasionally waving at them. The street was quiet and peaceful. A gentle breeze carried the scent of summer flowers. Somewhere in the distance, children were laughing. "Mom," Emma said suddenly. "Yes, sweetheart?" "Thank you for being strong, for protecting me, for not giving up." Caroline felt tears prick her eyes, but they were good tears. "Thank you for being strong too, for standing with me, for facing all of this with courage I didn't know anyone could have, especially someone your age. You amaze me every single day." They sat together in comfortable silence as darkness fell, 2 women who had walked through fire and emerged on the other side. Not unscathed, they bore scars, visible and invisible, that would mark them forever, but alive, safe, together. And that, Caroline thought, was everything that mattered. Life, the nightmare was over. Complicated, precious life, continued, and they were ready for whatever came next because they had learned the most important lesson of all. When you face the darkness together, you can find your way back to the light.